Picture this. Our protagonist wakes up inside a novel where her own family wants her dead. Her only protector? A tiny slime living under her bed. But years later, that same demon returns as a dangerously handsome Archduke who just can't let her go. So yeah, welcome to one of the strangest love stories ever, where her squishy little monster becomes the male lead. Inside a tall, dimly lit tower, a menacing man stands before a young girl. With a smug grin, he tosses something to the ground and declares he's brought back a gift from his expedition. The problem? That gift happens to be two very dead monsters lying at Irina's feet. Irina forces an awkward smile, trying her best not to flinch. It's not like she can tell him, "Hey, maybe flowers next time?" Instead, she politely denies that there's a problem, though her face says otherwise. Deep down, she wonders what exactly she's supposed to say in this situation. After all, surviving in this novel world is already hard enough. This isn't just any world. It's a place where kidnapping, confinement, and madness are practically common hobbies. The story she's stuck in is called The Secret, a dark, thrilling romance about the obsessive love between the cold Archduke of the North and a noble crusader named Kay. The male lead, Alexei Ruslin, is the Empire's youngest swordmaster, a genius blessed with magic and cursed with questionable mental stability. He treats Kay horribly, but somehow insists it's his way of loving her. And like every other tragic romance, they eventually fall in love after countless misunderstandings and heartbreaks. Unfortunately, that happy ending doesn't come easy. Enter Duke Sordier, Irina's ambitious father, who dreams of becoming emperor. Unlike the other great houses, his family has no gift for swordsmanship or magic. So, naturally, he turns to the next best thing, making a deal with a demon. And if that means sacrificing his own children, so be it. By the end of the original story, the Duke summons a great devil, only for Alexei and Kay's power of love to conveniently defeat it. Back when Irina was just a reader, she even found it entertaining. She thought, wow, love conquers all. Classic romance cliché, but fun. That was before she woke up as Irina Sordier herself, the poor side character doomed to die for her father's sins. In the original story, the real Irina was sold off to the Archduke in a political marriage and met a tragic end at the hands of her own family. But this Irina, the one standing here now, refuses to be that pitiful girl. As Irina finishes mentally reviewing the novel's plot, the man before her interrupts again, asking if she really dislikes his gift. She tries to sound calm, though her twitching smile betrays her fear. She says the gift is just a little big. The man smirks, then reaches out his hand. Irina, internally screaming, has no choice but to take it. But instead of punishment, he places something small and wobbly in her palm, a blue jelly-like creature. A slime. He explains that he picked it up on his way back, a small one, but still a demon. Irina's survival instincts kick in immediately. She pretends to be thrilled, thanking him with a forced smile that seems to please him. Satisfied, he turns to leave, casually telling her to have fun playing with it. Once he's gone, Irina's smile fades instantly. She glares at the door, half annoyed that the man didn't bother taking the dead demons with him. But she lets it go. Someone else will clean them up, hopefully. Lying down on her bed, Irina stares at the ceiling, thinking about how difficult it is to survive in a story that's already been written. Still, she feels oddly relieved. At least she knows how the plot goes. And that means she can change it. Her plan? Simple. Step 1. Make sure her greedy father gets exactly what he deserves. Step 2. Go through the marriage, then file for a peaceful divorce, take some hefty alimony, and run away somewhere. Preferably far, far away from all this insanity. Step 3. Meet a kind, handsome man and live happily ever after, for real this time. As she plots her new life, the slime in her hand suddenly wiggles. Surprised, Irina looks down at it, her frustration fading for a moment. The creature feels soft, oddly comforting to touch. She keeps squishing and rubbing it, as if all her anger melts away with every squeeze. It's strangely therapeutic, until she squeezes a bit too hard and bursts out, frustrated, that she should have been the female lead instead. She did marry the Archduke, technically. But that's it. No romance, no passion, no anything. What's the point of being in an adult romance novel if she doesn't even get the benefits? Clenching her tiny fist, she mutters that it's still a shame she won't even get to kiss Alexei once. At that, the slime in her palm twitches. The little blob suddenly blushes. Yes, blushes, and squirms before leaping off her hand to hide under the bed. Irina blinks in confusion, peering down. Did she just embarrass a slime? Apparently, yes. Its entire body is glowing pink. Irina can't help but chuckle softly. So, this tiny blue jelly is shy about romance, huh? She gently coaxes it back out, promising she won't say kiss again. The slime hesitates, but eventually wiggles closer, as if forgiving her. It's cute, in a weird, jelly-like way. Still, she can't shake the feeling that something's off. Since when do slimes understand human words? They're supposed to be mindless blobs. But well, it's not like she has anyone else to talk to in this glorified prison cell, so she happily accepts her new squishy companion. Just as she starts to enjoy the company of her new slimy friend, the door bursts open. Another young girl rushes in, reminding Irina that it's time to eat. The maid freezes instantly when she spots the pile of demon corpses on the floor. Irina, trying to look casual, averts her gaze and mutters that it's nothing important, quickly changing the topic to the mealtime instead. Of course, she doesn't forget to quickly shove the slime into her pocket, patting it lightly as if to say, "Stay quiet in there." The two girls walk down the corridor, and Irina can't help but sigh internally. She already knew the maids treated the original Irina terribly, but wow, living through it herself? It's even worse than she imagined. The dining room doors creaked open, but what greeted her was a group of servants, sitting comfortably, laughing, and feasting. The lady of House Sordier, reduced to standing there like an unwanted guest in her own home. The servants didn't even bother to hide their mockery. They greeted her with exaggerated sympathy, saying she'd arrived too late, and they had no choice but to start eating without her. But hey, there's still food left, so she shouldn't worry. The sarcasm in their tone was almost impressive. Irina, however, wasn't fooled. They'd clearly done this on purpose, deliberately calling her late just to humiliate her. The old Irina would have been devastated by their cruelty. But this Irina? Of course, she won't back down and quietly took her seat, determined to eat in peace. But peace was never an option. Just as she picked up her spoon, a sharp smack echoed through the room. The culprit? None other than Rosia, the head maid and the self-proclaimed authority of the house. Rosia glared down at her with fake disapproval, scolding Irina for holding the spoon incorrectly. According to her, Irina hadn't learned a thing about etiquette despite being taught daily. Then, with an icy smile, she snatched Irina's bowl away, saying she'd already eaten plenty. Irina's voice rose with anger. She hadn't eaten anything. But Rosia, ever the manipulator, twisted the truth, insisting Irina had already had lunch an hour earlier and must simply have a bad memory. The lie was meant for the audience, Rosia's beloved daughter, Bella, who sat there believing her mother's every word. In truth, Irina hadn't eaten a single crumb all day. After putting on her little performance, Rosia excused herself for some urgent business, leaving Bella alone with Irina. The naive girl, still completely unaware of the cruelty around her, apologized, saying she didn't know Irina had already eaten earlier. She even defended her mother, saying Rosia only acted that way for Irina's sake. Oh, if only Irina could tell her the truth. She wanted to snap back, to finally say what she really thought, but she bit her tongue. One wrong move, and Rosia would make sure she paid for it later. But while Irina stayed calm, someone else clearly didn't share her restraint. From her pocket, a tiny blob of jelly wobbled with visible anger. Then, the little slime leapt into the air and smacked Bella right in the face, knocking her out cold. Yes, the slime had just declared war. The creature then proudly waved its squishy little hand as if saying, "Don't worry, boss, I handled it." After that, he looked at her with sparkling eyes, clearly waiting for praise. Irina chuckled softly, understanding the message. He wanted her to trust him more. But their moment of victory didn't last long, because Bella soon began to stir on the floor. Thinking quickly, Irina grabbed a food tray and hid her slimy partner behind her back. In a calm voice, she fabricated the perfect cover story. Bella had simply tripped while picking something up. As expected, the ever-clueless girl bought it instantly and went right back to cleaning up. Later, back in her room, Irina looked down at her tiny hero and wondered just how powerful he really was. A slime having memory-erasing abilities? That shouldn't even be possible. Still, she concluded one thing. Her little friend was special. She thanked him for his help. which made the little creature do an adorable dance on her palm. Irina noticed he wasn't just cute. He was smart too. Maybe even smarter than most humans in this house. So, she decided, they'd visit the library together to learn more about him. But before any research could begin, reality hit, through the growling of her empty stomach. The sound echoed through the room like a cry for help. She was completely fed up with the way everyone in this house treated her, not even allowing her to eat. That was a new level of cruelty. Just as she was about to collapse from hunger, something miraculous happened. A faint aroma of freshly cooked food wafted into the room. She turned, and to her surprise, saw her slime buddy proudly standing on the window ledge. Irina's eyes widened, then filled with tears. This little creature had somehow managed to sneak food for her. She then whispered her thanks, and devoured every bite, savoring it like it was the most delicious meal in the world. When she finished, her plate was nearly spotless. Overflowing with gratitude, she picked up her little rescuer and nuzzled him against her cheek. He wobbled shyly, clearly enjoying the affection. Then, he hopped off her hand and turned toward the window again. Moments later, he returned, with dessert. Overwhelmed with happiness, she smiled and made a heartfelt declaration. From now on, they were friends forever. The slime trembled with emotion, clearly touched by her words. While Irina enjoyed her sweets, he wobbled determinedly toward a nearby table, climbed it with some effort, and reached for a pen and paper. Curious, Irina watched as the little slime concentrated hard, his tiny jelly arms struggling to hold the pen steady. Finally, he scribbled something on the paper. When she leaned closer, she saw one word written in shaky letters, "Friend." It was clumsy, but absolutely perfect. Irina couldn't help but smile softly. Not only could he understand her, he could write too. Her heart melted at the thought. For the first time in this cold, hateful place, someone actually cared about her. Still, she reminded him gently that he couldn't stay too long. Her father was always watching, and if anyone discovered him, it would be dangerous. But the slime only puffed up his tiny chest and tapped it proudly, as if saying, "Don't worry, I'm reliable." Amused, Irina teased that she'd only believe that once he proved himself dependable. And with that, she declared their first mission, heading to the library to uncover the truth about her mysterious little friend. Inside the library, Irina couldn't help but stare in awe. The place was massive. Still, she had to be careful. The librarian nearby looked more nervous than surprised, his eyes darting between her and the door. She could already tell he was thinking, should I tell the Duke? And knowing her evil dad's personality, he definitely would. So, Irina quickly came up with an excuse in case word got out. If her father asked, she'd just say she was doing her dutiful daughter research on the Archduke's family. Purely academic, of course. Totally not suspicious. She started by pulling out a book about her so-called future husband, but that wasn't really what she came for. Her real mission was to learn more about slimes, specifically the blue jelly one hiding in her pocket. Unfortunately, the books she needed were placed on the highest shelf, way out of reach for her petite height. Of course, the universe had to make things difficult. She considered asking the librarian for help, but when she turned around, he was sitting there, scribbling something down with an aura so gloomy it could put storm clouds to shame. Yeah, never mind asking him. As she frowned at her current dilemma, the little slime in her pocket noticed her struggle. Ever the eager helper, he began to wiggle as if volunteering. Irina looked down and whispered that it was too risky. He shouldn't be seen by anyone. Plus, what could a blob the size of her palm possibly does to help? She was about to tease him further when she noticed he suddenly froze. That's when she realized someone was standing right behind her. Turning around slowly, Irina found herself face to face with the last person she wanted to see. Her older brother, Valentin. The man practically radiated intimidation, his sharp gaze and quiet presence enough to make even demons nervous. He asked why she looked so startled, like she'd been caught red-handed. Irina panicked and blurted out the first thing that came to mind, that she was just looking up information about the slime he had given her. Valentin's expression softened ever so slightly, and to Irina's utter shock, he blushed. He muttered to himself that his sister must really like his gift, probably because it didn't reek of blood, unlike him. Irina had absolutely no idea what he was mumbling about, so she just gave a nervous laugh and pretended not to hear. Valentin then asked her something even stranger, whether she liked demons. The question made Irina's stomach drop. Of course not. She immediately denied it. But instead of being angry, her brother just looked confused. He calmly asked, if that were true, why did she throw away all the jewelry he'd given her? What jewelry? Irina didn't remember receiving anything. Then it hit her. The gifts must have never reached her because of one certain snake named Rosia. So Irina quickly pieced the story together, and in the most dramatic performance of her life, teared up. She told her brother that she thought Rosia had stolen everything, which of course was true. But the added tears really sold it. The effect was instant. Valentin's expression darkened like a storm brewing, and without another word, he turned on his heel, clearly ready to go deal with the treacherous maid himself. But before he could storm out, Irina instinctively called out his name. The moment her voice reached him, he stopped. Valentin's expression alone could have sent anyone running for their life. For a split second, Irina was sure she was done for. Goodbye, world. Goodbye, slime. Goodbye, everything. But turns out, it wasn't anger. He was just shocked and delighted that his little sister had actually called his name. The man looked like someone had just handed him a lifetime supply of affection. He even started repeating his own name over and over again, like he couldn't believe she'd said it out loud. Honestly, it was a little weird, but kind of endearing, in a terrifying older brother way. Once he'd gotten over that, he helped Irina grab the slime-related book she'd been reaching for. When she thanked him, she also took the chance to express her gratitude for the little slime he'd given her before. Of course, Valentin immediately offered to get her an even bigger demon next time. Absolutely not. One tiny slime was more than. She politely and nervously declined, insisting that his current gift was perfect. Valentin looked genuinely pleased by that answer. But just as the moment was starting to feel oddly wholesome, the door swung open. An uninvited maid barged right in, loudly accusing Irina of being lazy and saying the head maid had something to tell her. That is, until she noticed who else was in the room. Valentin's gaze darkened instantly. In a slow, measured voice that promised danger, he asked the maid about her tone toward his sister. The woman immediately tried to spin it as a simple misunderstanding, but Valentin wasn't buying it. In fact, he came to a much harsher conclusion, that this was how the entire staff must have been treating Irina when he wasn't around. That was all it took. He ordered the maid to gather every servant in the household, right now. The woman stumbled away in terror, practically tripping over herself to obey. Once she was gone, Valentin turned back to Irina. His expression softened again as he told her to rest and not to worry. He'd handle the servants himself. And surprisingly, Irina realized for the first time that maybe her scary big brother wasn't such a monster after all. He actually cared. Of course, Irina and her little slime couldn't help but feel a little excited to see what kind of lesson Valentin would teach those rude servants. Justice, big brother style. After that, Irina shifted her focus to something else, like giving her little companion a name. Slime felt too plain, and calling him Mew, since that's all he ever says, was a little too on the nose. Well, I considered naming him something cool like Rimuru. Still, her squishy friend didn't seem to mind whatever she called him. Maybe Jelly wasn't so bad either. Putting that aside, Irina finally opened one of her newly borrowed books to begin their research. The first chapter was about the world's strongest slime. According to it, slimes were technically the weakest demons. But there was a twist. Even high-ranking demons could turn into slimes if they exhausted all their demonic power. Some rare slimes could even consume other races and perfectly mimic them. Unfortunately, the book didn't go into detail, leaving her more confused than before. Irina then looked at her little companion with curiosity. Just, what was he really? She asked directly. But as always, the slime just let out a cheerful mew, rubbing affectionately against her hand. Feeling oddly comfortable, Irina thought maybe it was time to share her own secret with him. A little mutual trust, perhaps. She was about to confess everything when... Footsteps. Someone was approaching her door. Panicking, she quickly whispered for her slime friend to hide under the bed again. The door slammed open with a bang, and in marched Valentin, dragging none other than Rosia. The woman shrieked for him to let her go, but her words fell on deaf ears. Valentin wasn't in the mood for excuses. His eyes were locked on Irina as he asked what she wanted him to do with the thief. Rosia, of course, didn't take that lightly. She immediately slipped into her favorite role, the innocent victim. With a falsely sweet voice, she insisted that she was innocent, But her act barely lasted 2 seconds before Valentine's icy glare shut her down completely. Still, the woman was nothing if not persistent. She dared to raise her voice, accusing the young master of blindly believing his sister and, worse, calling his actions an act of disobedience toward the Duke Sordier himself. That was the wrong name to mention. The instant the Duke was brought up, Valentine's temper finally cracked. Ignoring Rosia's frantic warning that the Duke would punish him when he returned, Valentine yanked her closer, his expression cold enough to freeze blood. He reminded her that while his father was away, he was the one in charge of this household, whether Rosia liked it or not. Then, he turned to Irina once more and asked what kind of punishment his dear little sister thought the thief deserved. Irina began to hesitate. Rosia had treated her like trash for so long, humiliating her, starving her, even stealing everything her brother had ever gifted her. And all because that scheming woman wanted her own daughter, Bella, to become the true lady of the house. The old Irina had been too meek to fight back, but this Irina wasn't about to stay silent anymore. So, with a trembling but resolute voice, Irina revealed everything: the stolen jewelry, the lies, the cruelty. And just for good measure, she ended her confession with a teary, pitiful expression. After all, in moments like this, the one who cries first usually wins. Rosia is stunned. Never in her life had Irina talked back. But realizing the danger she was in, the woman tried one last desperate move. She claimed Irina was slandering her, another lie that only sealed her fate. But before she could even finish, Valentine's hand struck her across the face, sending her crashing to the floor. His voice, calm but venomous, declared that this was the price she paid for daring to mistreat his sister. And that wasn't all. He announced that from now on, Rosia would serve as an example for every servant in the mansion. No one would dare disrespect Irina again. Rosia's pleas filled the air as Valentine dragged her toward the door. But before leaving, he paused, turning to Irina with a much gentler expression. He asked if she wanted anything as a gift. Irina, ever the clever one, smiled sweetly and replied that she already loved everything he gave her. Satisfied and touched, Valentine nodded before he marched off to deliver justice personally. The moment the coast was clear, Irina rushed to lift her little slime friend from under the bed. The two couldn't help but laugh in shared triumph. The wicked headmaid had finally gotten what she deserved, and all thanks to her terrifyingly reliable big brother. With that chaos out of the way, Irina turned back to what she'd been meaning to confess earlier and tell her little companion the truth. She wasn't really from this world. One day, she'd woken up inside an adult novel. The story only got steamy after the original Irina died in a political mess. A dramatic kidnapping, and the male lead, Alexei, keeping his beloved captive so she'd never leave him. Now, for most people, that would sound like a red flag, but not for Irina. Our girl was fangirling. She genuinely believed that love, when mixed with a bit of hardship, made it all the more beautiful. Her blue buddy, however, took her words a bit too literally. In his mind, abduction didn't sound so bad if it meant Irina got a nicer room, steady meals, and zero money problems. In short, imprisonment sounded like a solid upgrade from her shabby tower life. Still, Irina wasn't about to let him run off and test that logic. She gently reminded him that abduction is not something one should do without permission. Fantasy and reality, she said, are two completely different worlds. Then she paused, realizing she was explaining adult topics to a creature who might as well be a kid. But before she could stop herself, the slime smacked his little jelly hands, proudly declaring that he was, in fact, an adult. Irina couldn't help laughing. He was just too cute for words. Their talk eventually turned to the romance's kissing scene, and when she teasingly asked if the demon in front of her had ever kissed anyone before, his entire blue body turned pink. Irina laughed so hard she could barely breathe, calling him a baby. Trying to steer the conversation back, Irina admitted she would have liked to live with the Archduke if she were the main character. She even confessed she liked him for being strong and good-looking. The moment she said that, the little slime tried to flex, straining his jelly body to look muscular, except it's actually wobblier. It made Irina laugh even harder, though she quickly apologized when he slumped over like a melted marshmallow. She hurried to reassure him, saying that in her eyes, he was far more charming than the Archduke anyway. That perked him right up. Then he curiously asked what marry meant. Irina explained that marriage made two people the closest in the world, a thought that quite literally made him glow from the inside out. Without warning, the little blob bounced off the bed and toward the window. Irina panicked, thinking he'd fling himself out of the tower or get caught by guards. But when she peeked out moments later, she saw him plucking flowers. He proudly returned and offered them to her, touching her finger gently. The message was clear. This was a proposal. Irina decided to tease him a bit. She thanked him, but said she had to marry the Archduke instead. The poor slime drooped immediately, so she described her future husband as someone powerful and charismatic, asking if he thought he could ever beat a man like that. The little monster, ever determined, bounced confidently in reply. Irina tried not to laugh and praised his bravery. Then she jokingly added that before marriage, couples usually hold hands and share a kiss. The suggestion nearly broke him. He started jiggling nervously, but somehow gathered enough courage to try. Irina, playing along, closed her eyes, only to feel something was off. In her panic, she opened her eyes, leaned forward by accident, and, yep, they actually kissed. If embarrassment could kill, that slime would have evaporated on the spot. Mortified beyond words, he jumped away and hid under the bed. Irina quickly followed, trying not to laugh while coaxing him out. She teasingly pointed out how funny it was for someone brave enough to propose yet too shy to handle a kiss. She even added maybe they could think about marriage once he grew into a confident, male lead-worthy version of himself. Meanwhile, far from the adorable scene, the headmaid shivered in the cold darkness of the underground prison. Even inside, she clung to her delusions, convinced that once the Duke returned, everything would go back to normal. Her thoughts, however, weren't of regret, but revenge. She swore she'd make Valentine pay for what he did to her. More dangerously, she vowed to erase Irina completely so her own daughter could take her place. The woman's obsession made her eyes gleam like a lunatic. The next morning, Irina and her little slime buddy are out for a peaceful walk. The two wander around the garden. Irina can't help but complain about how ridiculous it is that she can't even take a simple stroll without permission. Fresh air shouldn't be a luxury, but for her, it basically is. Soon enough, she spots Valentine waiting under a tree like some brooding prince. Except, this one looks way too serious. Irina grows nervous when he gestures for her to come closer, saying they need to talk about something important. The tone alone already screams bad news. Still, Valentine makes sure his sister's comfort comes first. Before she can even sit, he lays out a blanket, brushes it clean, and starts unpacking what looks like a mini feast. Fruits, sandwiches, the works. Irina's eyes practically sparkle at the sight. Clearly, a little food goes a long way for her soul. As they eat, he finally says the truth. Their dear old father, the walking definition of evil, is returning soon. And apparently he's bringing along something far worse than his presence, a poison called the Kalinda flower. According to her brother, this poison doesn't kill right away. No, it's the slow, painful kind. The kind that makes you vomit blood, rot from the inside, and then die miserably. Ah, yes. Classic fatherly affection. Irina knows exactly what this is. In the original novel she read, the original Irina died from that same poison. It's literally her scripted death flag. Valentine continues grimly, explaining that one of them will have to take it, and knowing their father, it's not really a choice. If they disobey, things will get worse, especially for Irina. Irina instantly realizes where this is heading. In the book, she remembers how the poison slowly transformed her body until her veins bloomed like a cursed flower. When that happened, her father used her as a weapon, marrying her off to Archduke Ruslan so that the Archduke would slowly die from her poisonous touch. A walking human toxin for political revenge. Honestly, Worst Dad of the Year doesn't even begin to cover it. Still, Irina remembers one crucial detail the Duke doesn't know. The antidote exists, and it can be found deep within the Forest of the Dead, right near the Ruslan Manor, which means there's hope. Trying to act scared, well, as scared as she can pretend, Irina remarks that the poison thing sounds terrifying, but Valentine sees through her. She sounds way too calm, almost like she's curious about drinking it. He frowns, clearly not amused by his sister's bizarre enthusiasm. She tries to play it off with a fake, anxious face, but her brother isn't fooled. He suddenly declares that he'll take the poison instead, which makes Irina panic. She begs him not to, insisting his life is far more important, but that only makes him angrier. Valentine grabs her shoulders. warning her that if she drinks that poison, she'll die. Period. But little does he know, Irina's got a secret plan, and she's just being strategic. Because according to the novel's hidden lore, if someone consumes the poison and survives long enough for 5 petals to bloom on their wrist, then takes the antidote, they'll become stronger than anyone alive. Their body regenerates, senses heighten, and they gain a divine power that can literally purify demons. In short, she'd become unstoppable. Imagine Valentin turning into a glittery Sailor Moon 2.0 with divine powers is definitely not something the world's ready for. But back to reality. These two are deadlocked in their argument. It's a sibling standoff powered by pure stubbornness and love. Before it can escalate, a servant arrives. He says he has something urgent to report to Valentin. That ends the picnic right then and there. Valentin stands and escorts Irina back to her room himself. Once Irina was finally alone in her room, she let out a long sigh. Really? Only in this house could siblings argue over who gets to drink poison first. Ridiculous, right? Trying to shake off the nonsense, she reached into her pocket to check on her tiny friend, only to notice that the usually bright little slime had turned completely green. Even his shape looked off. For a second, Irina thought he might be sick. But no, the poor thing was just furious. Apparently, he'd overheard her plan to drink the poison, and was now terrified she might actually die. With a gentle smile, Irina patted his squishy body, trying to calm him down. "It's okay," she whispered, but the slime only shook his gooey head, clearly unconvinced. Having no choice, Irina finally called his new name, Lime, and pressed a quick kiss on his wobbly surface. She told him she had a plan, and promised she wouldn't die. That seemed to help a little, though Lime still trembled like a jelly under stress. Just then, loud footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Lime dove under her bed for cover. The unwanted guest was none other than Bella, who arrived fuming. She accused Irina of spreading lies about her own mother, the head maid, all because some servants had been gossiping again. Bella, ever the gullible one, actually believed that Irina was manipulating everyone for attention. She even declared that she'd find Irina's weakness, no matter what it took. Irina just gave her a tired thumbs up. What was the point of arguing with a girl whose logic was powered entirely by rumors? Bella suddenly remembered she had urgent matters to attend to, mainly that Duke Sordier had just returned home. Before leaving, she threw in one last warning. If Irina wanted to explain herself to the Duke before Bella tattled, she'd better hurry. Irina, ever composed, simply reminded Bella that she was the lady of the house, and that it was only proper for a servant to escort her. The way Bella's jaw clenched was priceless. Seething, she stomped off to obey. Before leaving, Irina glanced back at Lime. She quietly hoped he'd stay safe and hidden until she returned. Down in the grand dining room, Irina finally met the villain of her life story, her so-called father, Duke Sordier. He looked like an ordinary nobleman at first glance. But the moment he opened his mouth, that illusion shattered. His first order? Valentin should pack up and head straight to Crow's Forest tomorrow. The same forest infamous for being filled with demons, where no one ever comes back alive. Valentin had just returned from a mission up north, yet this man wanted to send him right back into another death trap. And for what? Irina knew the Duke wanted the rare demon's item said to summon a devil. He was obsessed with claiming the imperial throne, even if it meant sacrificing his own son. What confused Irina most was Valentin's obedience. This wasn't how things went in the novel. He wasn't supposed to act this way, like he'd already been brainwashed. Then came the Duke's next chilling line. He reminded Valentin to be cooperative, hinting that he was holding something precious over him. So that was it. Her brother was obeying out of fear. Turning to Irina, the Duke lifted a vial filled with ominous liquid. He ordered her to drink it, saying it was time she proved her worth. Irina knew exactly what it was, and though she had been waiting for this moment, she had to fake cluelessness and fear. Valentin tried to intervene, insisting he should take it instead, but the Duke's glare froze him in place. The Duke made it very clear. If Valentin spoke again, he'd demonstrate what happens to those precious to Valentin. Cornered, Valentin apologized quickly. The Duke handed Irina the poison with a smug smile, claiming it would help her bloom into a brilliant flower. Sure, a flower from the underworld, maybe. Irina braced herself. It would probably hurt like hell. but she couldn't hesitate. When her father noticed her strange calm, she quickly replied that she was simply following his orders, no matter the result. That excuse worked, and before he could change his mind, she drank it all in one gulp. At first, it didn't hurt. Then came the searing pain in her stomach. Valentine's fists trembled, but he said nothing. The Duke, meanwhile, looked pleased. Later, the poison was clearly taking effect because Irina's vision blurred, making her steps wobbled. That's when Rosia appeared, blocking her way with a fake smile. The woman had the nerve to pretend concern, asking if Irina was all right. Irina tried to keep her composure, but one cough, followed by blood, ruined the act. The head maid offered to help her back to her room, only to shove her inside and lock the door after sneering that Valentine would soon be gone too. "Good luck surviving without your ally," she mocked before leaving. Even through the pain, Irina whispered that she'd survive no matter what. Then she collapsed on her bed, feeling lonelier than ever. But through her fading vision, she spotted a familiar blur. Irina smiled weakly and tried to joke that Lime did a great job hiding. But little Slime looked absolutely horrified at her condition. Irina told him she was fine, just sleepy. Once she closed her eyes, Lime let out a trembling and dramatic mew as if Irina died. When Irina woke again, she was met with the strangest yet most comforting sight. She was lying in a literal slime bed. Turns out, Lime had wrapped himself around her, warming her stomach to ease the pain. It looked oddly relaxing, like a heating pad made of jelly, but somehow it worked. Irina chuckled weakly, telling him he was the best slime ever. Lime puffed up proudly, pleased by the praise. But then Irina hugged him gently, whispering her thanks. Because of him, she didn't feel so lonely in that cold, miserable tower anymore. A little while later, Irina woke up again feeling surprisingly refreshed. Sure, her stomach still felt a little funny, kind of what you'd expect after drinking poison, but at least she wasn't dead. That alone counted as a good start to the day. She glanced beside her and saw Lime, still loyally by her side. For a moment, she couldn't help wondering what her life would have been like without this little slime. But Irina's expression turned serious as a thought crossed her mind. If the Duke ever found out about Lime, things would go south fast. She knew her father too well. Whenever she showed interest in anything, he either destroyed it or made sure it stayed far away from her. And a mysterious little creature living in her room. Oh, he'd crush Lime without hesitation. So Irina told Lime that if anything dangerous happened, he had to run away. "Go north and don't look back," she said. But Lime, being the stubborn little jelly he was, wriggled in protest. He clearly had no intention of leaving. He wanted to stay and protect her. Irina laughed, half touched and half exasperated. Flopping back onto her bed, she held Lime close, brushing him gently against her cheek. He was so small, but his loyalty was enormous. When he tried to pull a blanket over her as if to prove his reliability, Irina couldn't help smiling. She patted his head fondly, promising to listen to her brave little demon. Still, she kept reminding him. If danger came, he had to go north. She admitted she couldn't come right away, but she swore she'd find him there eventually. Of course, Lime teared up instantly. In his own squishy language, he tried to tell her that if she didn't come with him, she'd just end up sick or dead. Irina assured him that wouldn't happen, though deep down, she knew how the original novel went. In that story, Irina was destined to die at the hands of her brainwashed brother. Lime, however, puffed up with determination, flexing his non-existent muscles as he vowed to kill Valentine if that's what it took to protect her. The mental image of a tiny blue blob charging at her tall, stoic brother with war cries was so absurd that Irina couldn't help laughing. She told him that defeating Valentine wouldn't be so easy. With teary eyes, Lime touched her hand and quietly said that they should live together for a long, long time. Irina's heart softened again. Her little slime really was a warm, sensitive soul. Hugging him close, she promised that the two of them would live together for a long, long time. On the other hand, the Duke sat in his office, holding yet another tedious meeting with his men. His first topic of the day? Archduke Ruslan, the man who'd recently earned the prestigious title but hadn't been seen outside his castle since. One of the Duke's subordinates reported that there was still no activity from the north. But Duke Sordier didn't buy it. The idea that someone like Alexei would just sit quietly in his manor made no sense. He concluded there must be a serious problem. Either Alexei's health or his mind had gone downhill. To confirm his theory, another man mentioned that the spies sent north had spotted the Archduke inside his castle. Of course, the Duke, being the paranoid schemer he was, suspected it could be an impersonator. He immediately ordered his men to dig deeper and bring back more details about Alexei's situation. Then his focus shifted to his own son. Valentin reported that retrieving the demon item would take about 2 weeks, but that didn't please the Duke at all. 2 weeks? Too long. So he gave his son a cruel ultimatum: finish the task in 1 week, and he'd hand over the antidote to the Kalinda poison. The Duke even threw in a little reminder of how Valentin's mother had died, coughing up blood from poison, just like Irina would if he failed. The message was clear: work faster, or lose everything. Cornered yet again, Valentin lowered his head and left without a word. Once the door closed, the Duke sneered, muttering that Valentin was just as foolish as his mother. He called his own son a weakling, even though that same weakling was supposed to be his successor. But the meeting wasn't over. His underlings began reporting updates about both Valentin and Irina. First, Valentin's teacher proudly shared that his student would soon become a swordmaster. However, he also noted that Valentin lacked academic knowledge because he's too focused on battle, not enough on study. He even suggested he will provide more education to avoid tarnishing the Duke's family name. The Duke waved him off. He didn't want Valentin to be smart, just obedient. A dog should know how to fight, not how to think, he implied. Then came reports about Irina. Apparently, she'd been spotted visiting the library, especially the section about demons. Her teacher explained that they had recently studied demonology, so he assumed that was why Irina grew curious. But the Duke didn't buy that for a second. He scoffed, saying that Irina had always been trembling and clueless during her previous lessons. There was no way she suddenly developed curiosity out of nowhere. Someone or something must be influencing her, which unfortunately wasn't a wrong guess. Determined to find out, the Duke ordered his servants to tighten their surveillance on Irina. And just to be extra cruel, he instructed the headmaid to lock Irina's tower doors that night. The headmaid's wicked little smirk said it all. And if her face was anything to go by, that new command spelled nothing but trouble for poor Irina. Irina was having one of those wild, cinematic dreams again. This time it starred none other than the 2 main leads. Kay had just finished tending to his wounds when, out of nowhere, Alexei pulled her down and pinned her to the bed. Kay tried to push him off, but he refused, saying he couldn't let her go, because he was afraid she'd run away again. It was that moment, the one that's supposed to get steamy, when the dream suddenly ended. Irina blinked awake, groaning in disappointment. Of course, she missed the best part. That was exactly when a green liquid dripped onto her hand. Slowly, her eyes followed it upward. And there it was, a nightmare demon. The creature lunged forward and clamped its clawed hand around her neck. One touch, and she instantly knew who sent it. Of course, it had her father's cruel fingerprints all over it. His version of discipline apparently involved summoning horrors into his daughter's dreams. The worst part? Even though this was a dream, the pain felt real. Every time the demon's grip tightened, it burned. Irina tried to convince herself she could wake up. Just open her eyes and it would all vanish. But the agony was too sharp. Just when she thought she'd pass out, a bright light cut through the darkness. It's her little slime companion, brandishing a dagger that shimmered like moonlight. With a heroic leap, he charged at the demon. Unfortunately, the poor thing was flicked away like a dust mote before he could land a blow. Irina's heart clenched. She wanted to rush to him, to see if he was okay. But the demon pinned her again. Still, Lime didn't stay down. Somehow, despite being small and totally outmatched, he pulled himself together and tried again. Over and over he jumped, attacked, and got smacked back. Then, the dagger in his hand started glowing brighter. One final leap, one perfect strike, right into the demon's chest. The creature's form melting into nothing before vanishing completely. Irina caught Lime as he fell. He looked exhausted and bruised, but alive. He smiled as he said that no matter what happens, even if he got hurt, he'd always protect her. Morning came when Irina shot up again, panting and disoriented. For a second, she thought it had all been a bad dream, until she saw Lime sitting there, smiling gently, with a tiny scar just under his eye. That's when it hit her. It wasn't just a dream. Her heart swelled with relief and guilt. She scolded him gently, reminding him that next time, he should have run away. But Lime simply wiggled against her palm, apologizing in his adorable, clumsy way. Sorry for being small and for pretending to be stronger than he was. Irina realized it was probably her fault. She did once say she liked strong men like the Archduke after all. "You really are a fool," she muttered, then added that he didn't need to try being stronger. He already was. She hugged him close, whispering her thanks for saving her. "You're amazing, Lime," she murmured, then even declared that he was exactly her ideal type. And if there's a heaven for little slimes, Lime definitely ascended right then and there, because that was probably the happiest moment of his entire gooey life. On the flip side, Duke Sortier watched the unlit candle marking his nightmare demon's life gutter down sooner than planned, and felt something he didn't enjoy. Uncertainty. A low-level demon shouldn't fail so cleanly. If a frail girl could dispel his creature, then either the beast had been weaker than reported, or someone was shielding her. He didn't tolerate mysteries. With a thin smile, he set the house into motion. Guards to sweep corridors, servants to report anyone who entered Irina's tower, and orders to dispose of any helper without delay. His command was simple and merciless. Find the aid, erase it, and leave no loose ends. Left alone in his study, the Duke sat still, thinking about the defeated nightmare demon. Either someone had helped Irina, or she had awakened divine powers like her late mother. After all, the only reason he'd married a priestess was to have a child with divine power. But instead, all he got were what he called failures. To him, his wife had been a foolish woman, always protecting their useless children simply because they were hers. He even remembered the time she tried to take their son Valentin's place on a dangerous expedition. He'd cruelly refused, saying that if Valentin truly possessed divine power, he would have been on the battlefield long ago. Then he went further, blaming her for giving birth to weak children and mocking her for crying. When she shouted back, he struck her across the face. Then he reminded her how her family died because she defied him. The Duke loved using her weakness, her love for her family against her. It was how he controlled her, and how he still believed he could control everyone else. Now, thinking back, the Duke smirked to himself. No one could ruin his plans. No one ever had. While he's out here plotting like some evil mastermind, a tiny slime hero's already getting ready to flip his whole world upside down. Yep, this old geezer's downfall. It's bubbling up fast. Back to Irina, who's trying to make sense of the crooked little handkerchief she'd been working on. Let's just say, arts and crafts were not her talent. She yawned wide and loud, not even bothering to be graceful about it. Sitting right beside her is Bella, who threw Irina a disapproving look and gently reminded her that it's unladylike to yawn without covering her mouth. Of course, Irina didn't care. Instead, she lazily asked why Bella was even in her room. Bella answered plainly. The Duke ordered her to keep an eye on Irina. Yep. Even in her own room, the poor girl didn't have a shred of privacy. Bella claimed it wasn't just about watching, though. There were so many things she needed to teach Irina. Curious, Irina glanced at her. Was Bella even capable of teaching anything? Surprisingly, yes. When it came to embroidery, Bella was actually good, thanks to daily lessons from the headmaid. Of course, another part of Rosia's long-term plan to make her daughter the next lady of the house. But then the mood shifted when Bella suddenly asked if Irina had been talking to someone in the middle of the night. She admitted she'd heard voices. Even the little slime hiding under Irina's bed, Lime, froze up in fear. Irina quickly denied everything, pretending to be clueless, but Bella didn't buy it. She insisted Irina was lying. Her voice was shaking after all. Bella even warned her that if she was plotting something weird, she should stop before she got caught, which wasn't helping at all. Their back and forth went nowhere, until Bella mentioned that Valentin was leaving soon. She reminded Irina that if anything suspicious got exposed after he left, she'd be in serious trouble. Bella meant it as advice, but it came out more like a threat. Irina glared at her, asking if she was threatening her. Before Bella could even respond, the door opened, and there was Valentin himself, standing there, glaring at her. Valentin calmly asked her to repeat what she said about things being revealed after he left. Bella immediately panicked, denied everything, and fled the room as fast as she could. After a while, Bella prepared tea for the siblings before leaving them alone. Irina let out a long sigh of relief and thanked her big brother. Finally, some peace. Valentin had come to say goodbye. He was leaving that very night to head toward Crow's Forest. His worried face made Irina smile softly. She told him to be careful and said she'd wait for his return. The gentle look on her face reminded him so much of their late mother. He smiled and promised he'd come back safely. In that moment, Irina realized she'd truly grown fond of her brother. She genuinely hoped he would return unharmed. Then Valentine's gaze landed on her masterpiece, the handkerchief with the droplet design. Irina, clueless about what he was thinking, casually said it was a gift she made for someone. Naturally, Valentine assumed it was for him. But his hope shattered instantly when Irina proudly said it was for Lime. He looked like he'd just been betrayed by life itself. Meanwhile, Lime was absolutely delighted, wobbling happily when Irina said he looked good in white. Valentine mumbled something about her giving a slime a handkerchief, and Irina explained that it was so everyone would know that slime belongs to her. Valentine staggered as he walked, bumping into the door like his soul just left his body. Poor guy. In that world, giving someone a handkerchief was a symbol of wishing them luck before they went to war. No wonder her brother looked so defeated. To make up for it, Irina remembered another handkerchief she'd made before, one with the swordier emblem. It was a bit dusty, but after a few flaps it looked good as new. She handed it to him, and Valentine's face lit up. He thanked her shyly. Just then, Irina leaned in and whispered a small request. She wanted to know where he found Lime. Valentine whispered back that he'd picked the little slime up near the Celtic River. That made Irina's eyes widen. Celtic River was dangerously close to Barth's Plains, a place where demon gates often appeared. How on earth did her little slime survive that? Seeing her worried look, Valentine asked if she was curious about Lime. Of course she was. After all, her slime was totally different from normal ones. Just look at him giving Valentine that deadly side-eye. Valentine glared right back, muttering that he'd find out more about the little creature, preferably by stabbing it, which made Irina panic immediately. He eventually promised to just observe Lime, nothing more. Since she had her demon lessons that day, Irina couldn't bring Lime along, but leaving him alone in her room wasn't an option either. What if a maid tried to clean him with a broom? So she decided to entrust Lime to Valentine temporarily. Before leaving, Irina warned her brother that if he dared to mess with Lime, or if they fought while she was gone, she'd hate him as much as humanly possible. Then, with a heavy heart, she handed Lime over and walked away, leaving the two alone together. Valentine didn't really understand why he, of all people, had been reduced to babysitting a slime. But since Irina herself asked him to do it, he had no choice. So here he was, keeping a close eye on the squishy creature. At first glance, Lime didn't seem much different from the other slimes Valentine had encountered before. But this one was odd. For one, it had eyes and a mouth. Thinking back, Valentine remembered the first time he'd met the demon. It was during a mission at the Barth's Plains, by the Celtic River, the same dangerous place his father had sent him to fight. That's where he found this strange little thing. Who knew it would one day end up as his sister's favorite friend? Lime, on the other hand, hopped off Valentine's hand and wiggled away on the floor, clearly uninterested in being monitored. Valentine warned him that trying to escape was pointless. He was stuck with him until Irina returned from her lesson. But Lime didn't even bother to respond. Not even a glance. Just full-on silent treatment. That was when Valentine finally understood what Irina had been saying. This slime definitely understood human speech. It just chose to ignore him. Valentine frowned, deep in thought. Either Lime was a low-ranking demon with intelligence, or it could use some kind of psychic magic. Whichever it was, the fact that it could side-eye him like that didn't sit right. Still, despite his irritation, Valentine didn't really hate the little guy. Because truthfully, Lime had done something even he couldn't. It made Irina smile again. He remembered how his sister used to be like a fragile doll locked away in that tower, emotionless and quiet. But now, thanks to this odd little slime, she'd started laughing again. So no matter how weird Lime was, Valentine couldn't bring himself to suspect it of anything evil. Trying to be friendly, Valentine decided to sit and relax, but his eyes immediately caught the state of the room. Complete disaster. Clearly this wasn't the slime's fault, but the maid's. The mess screamed neglect. Annoyed, Valentine made a mental note to discipline those maids properly later. For now, he started tidying things himself. But just as he was picking up a pile of books, a piece of paper slipped out and fell. The words read, "Marry me." Yeah, definitely not Irina's handwriting, and she certainly wouldn't propose to anyone like that. Then, to his utter disbelief, Lime waved his tiny jelly arms proudly, basically admitting he was the one who wrote it. Valentin's expression went flat. He marched over and demanded to know how on earth a slime could even write human words, much less propose marriage to his sister. Lime just jiggled happily, clearly thinking he'd done something wonderful. Valentin crumpled the paper in his fist and declared that he would never allow that, not while he was alive. That seemed to finally get through to the little blob. Lime's bouncy confidence faltered a little. Then came the tiny rebellion. Lime tried to attack Valentin's feet, or at least that's what it looked like. But the man easily caught him mid-swing. The two glared at each other. Well, one glared, the other jiggled, until Valentin finally sighed and spoke more seriously. He told Lime flat out that marrying Irina was impossible. Her fiancé had already been chosen, Archduke Ruslan. Whether Irina liked it or not, that was her fate. Then he asked bluntly if Lime could even kill the Archduke to stop it. Lime could only let out a weak little mew. Valentin continued, sounding more like a drill sergeant than an older brother. If anyone wanted to marry his sister, that man had to meet strict standards. Lime just wobbled patiently as Valentin lectured him about what kind of man was suitable. Then, in an act of pure rebellion, Lime hopped free and scribbled something down. No human. Valentin stared at the words. So that's what this was about. Lime actually thought no human could marry Irina. The slime seriously had no idea of its own place. Patiently, Valentin explained that when Irina finally met her future husband, the man needed to look dependable. Then he glanced at Lime, a squishy, translucent blob that jiggled every few seconds. Dependable. Not quite. And yet, Lime immediately changed shape, stretching and reshaping himself into a rectangular block, as if trying to say, "See, I can be solid too." Valentin had to admit the effort was impressive. He then reminded Lime that no matter how solid he became, it didn't change the fact that he was still a slime. The man worthy of Irina needed to be smart, better at swordsmanship than Valentin, cold to others but gentle to her, skilled in etiquette and dance, and above all, strong enough to protect her from their father. As Valentin laid out each requirement, Lime's eyes burned with quiet determination. After some time, Irina finally returned to her room, only to halt at the sight before her. There was Lime, but not in his usual soft, round form. He was a rectangle, like a literal block of jelly. She quickly blurted out a question, asking why her adorable slime had suddenly decided to become furniture-shaped. Valentin just sighed, the kind of sigh that carried the weight of 10 years' worth of frustration, and muttered that this insufferable monster was far more arrogant and ambitious than any demon he'd ever met. Of course, Irina had no idea what he was even talking about, but instead of dwelling on it, she decided to change the topic to something actually important. She asked if he'd found out anything new about Lime while she was gone. Valentin coughed awkwardly, admitting that he hadn't had enough time. Still, he promised to ask the knights during his upcoming expedition instead. Before leaving, he warned Irina to stay cautious around Lime, his tone serious. Irina simply nodded with a gentle smile, assuring him she'd be fine. After all, what harm could a squishy blob even do? Once Valentin was gone, peace returned. Well, for about 5 seconds. Irina turned to Lime and gently urged him to go back to his normal form, but he proudly stayed rectangular. Amused, Irina tried to tease him, saying she'd just give her special gift to her soft and round slime instead. And just like that, Lime instantly reverted back to his adorable, squishy self. It was almost funny how fast he moved when gifts were involved. Irina laughed softly and tied the handkerchief she made earlier around his jelly body, smiling as Lime wiggled happily. He even made a little motion as if saying, "I really like it." Just as Irina was about to say something, she noticed Lime eating sweets from her table. In a rush of worry, she scooped Lime up and started shaking him, begging him to spit it out before it was too late. The poor thing flopped helplessly in her hands like jelly in an earthquake. A few seconds later, Lime wobbled slightly but was clearly fine, definitely not dying. Irina blinked in confusion. The monster book clearly said slimes couldn't eat human food. So how was Lime perfectly okay? There was only one way to find out. She decided she'd return to the library later to dig for more answers. But what Irina didn't realize was that all the noise from her room had already caught the attention of the worst possible person, the wicked headmaid herself. And if she'd heard everything, well, trouble was definitely on its way.